Happy crossover Thursday. Today, we are stopping in with Locked On Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw. I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. Shout out my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks to all of you for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget, wherever you're getting your shows, to hit like, hit subscribe, turn on notifications so you get that update whenever we post new content. You can stay in touch by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Real quick, I want to shout out FanDuel as they sponsor today's episode of Locked On Sun Devils and Locked On Jayhawks. Place your first $5 bet. You will get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crossover Thursday. Today, we are hanging out with Derek Johnson of the Locked On Jayhawks podcast, with ASU preparing to host Kansas this weekend. Fresh off of a bye week, the 3-1 Sun Devils coming off a humbling loss to Texas Tech. We're still looking for our first win in the new era of the Big 12. Kansas is slumping. They are 1-4 so far this year. Jalen Daniels, their star quarterback, has not been all that great this year, and ASU needs to find a way to capitalize. Well, on this edition of the Crossover Thursday, we are going to be taking a look at the key players in this game. We're going to take a look at the importance of this game, what's on the line, and how each team can win. And we round it out with a score prediction. I will see you guys over there. Till next time, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils. It's a special crossover edition of Locked On Sun Devils as I am joined with Derek Johnson from Locked On Jayhawks. Derek, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. I think there's actually going to be some Kansas fans who enjoy going out to a road game for this one. I mean, I don't know how many it'll be, but because getting to experience new places is part of kind of a new member. So I think this is kind of a fun little matchup.
It is. And this was a game that going into the year, I put in pen as like absolutely unwinnable. Fun fact, in my Big 12 media poll, I took Kansas to win the entire conference. I was all over Kansas, and they've underachieved, but I said on my podcast, and I will reiterate on this podcast, that does not mean they are suddenly a not talented football team. I feel like things could click at any time for Kansas. You also feel like that's a really hungry football team that's ready to get back in the win column. Jalen Daniels, he's having a bad year. Last I checked, he's still super duper talented. And if things fall into line for him, he's someone that I am very worried about in this game and is one of the top priorities to try and shut down.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been a bit of a roller coaster to say the least here. You look at things in 2022 and 2023, Jalen Daniels was exquisite. You look at total QBR, he ranked, pretty much in the top 10, top 20, depending on the year you're looking at nationally. And obviously he had injuries, so it wasn't a full slate or schedule in which he was going up against things. But then this year he comes in and the turnovers have just been too much. He's leading the Big 12 in turnovers and interceptions. It's gotten a little bit better the past couple of weeks, but you're still looking for his first 200-yard passing game. Just hasn't clicked so far with the new offensive coordinator, Jeff Grimes. And so does another week help that? It's entirely possible. Does another loss start to send things even more into turmoil for Kansas as a whole? That's also entirely possible. But you're right. It does feel like, there is still a clinging of hope here, even though things have not gone well, to the idea that, hey, if you can finally live up to your potential, maybe you can hit a hot streak here and just make it back to another bowl game. But until we see it tangibly and until they come through with, one of these games that has been close, they come through with it in the end, it's kind of hard to convince fans that things are going to turn this year right now.
University of Kansas is in Lawrence, correct?
Yes, correct.
What is the temperature in Lawrence like around this football team? Is it boiling hot? Is everyone kind of cool, calm, collective? What's it like in Lawrence right now?
So the tough part about Kansas is that, especially with how much they struggled over the previous really decade plus before Lance Leipold was here, and obviously it always is and always has been a basketball school first. And so, for the longest time, the saying you would always hear when Kansas would start the year 0-3 or 1-4 like they are now is, well, it's almost basketball season, right? Well, it's basketball season. And we haven't had that the past couple of years, and it's been great for everybody involved, but you're starting to hear that chirping. There are a lot of diehard KU football fans. Unfortunately, they are outnumbered by the KU basketball diehards who are more neutrals to football. And again, there are absolute diehards for football, and I absolutely love those people to death. But that is a big part of the fan base. And so when things aren't going well, you do see a little bit of a tuning out. So it is a little bit of, I think, in some of those past years when they weren't doing well, it was just like apathy. It was just not even caring about things. It was, whatever, we just won't pay attention. Now it's more of like, it's different because you did get people a little bit more hooked, a little invested. There were high expectations. There is a little bit more of, frustration, of anger, of, I put this out on social media after they lost to TCU, that this has got to be like the most frustrating season for KU football since at least 2009. They started that year 5-0. They ended up 5-7. Mark Mangino gets fired. The rest is history. And I had a bunch of fans being like, no, this is way worse, because even then they at least had a good start. And even then you saw the writing on the wall a little bit more. With this one, it is just so out of the blue.
It's funny that you mentioned the focus on basketball when things are bad for Kansas football. ASU can kind of relate, not because we're a basketball school, but because there's so much to do in what we call the Valley out here. And there's all sorts of golf courses. There's the Mill Avenue is very famous for all their clubs and bars and restaurants that they have, which is right next to the stadium. You're a short drive away from Flagstaff if you want to cool off. So when ASU football is not good, everybody else is going to find something else to do. Like, as much as you, and similar to what you said, there are definitely diehards. You have guys that, and just fans that have, had their season tickets for 50 plus years. But it's funny that you mentioned that there's times where it's kind of like, oh, well, it's basketball season, we're kind of moving on, because that can be ASU, not because it's basketball season, not because it's baseball season or anything like that, just because there's other stuff to do to kind of distract yourself from it. So that's really interesting to me. Must be nice to be a basketball school.
I have a friend who went to Arizona State, and he likes to remind me a lot that they are number one in innovation. So I guess when you're number one in innovation, there's a lot of other things going on, right?
10 years running. Yeah. Let's go ahead and talk about some key players in this game. I've got a handful of guys I'm looking at, 2 on offense, sort of 3 on defense. We'll get to that in just a moment. On offense, obviously, Sam Leavitt, the quarterback, is one of the key players. I did not include him because it's the quarterback. Like, we all know how important the quarterback is. I am focused on Cam Scadaboo, the running back, who I'm not sure if he's still leading the Big 12 in rushing yards after ASU had their bye week, but he's been an absolute monster for ASU. They've turned him into a bell cow. They give him 20 touches a game. He's averaging 5 yards a carry. He's averaging over 10 yards a catch. He's found the end zone 5 times. He ran for 262 yards against Mississippi State. He's been dominant. This is a guy you need to lean on for your offense. And Xavier Guillory, your wide receiver, is another guy I'm really interested in. He's not been entirely involved in the offense this year, but against Texas Tech, when they started going to him a little bit more and working him into the intermediate passing game, you sat there as a fan and you're like, where's this been all year long? And it's not a Guillory problem. It's a scheming problem. So I would like to see, coming off the bye week, getting Guillory more involved again, the guy who was listed as the number 1 receiver on your depth chart, but you haven't seen the first 3 weeks of the year, comes alive in the 4th game. Hopefully coming off of this bye week, ASU can maybe start getting him involved a little bit more.
Yeah, so when I'm looking, if I'm on the flip side of this, if I'm looking at the Kansas defense for players to watch because of some of those things, I look at you playing a key road game for Kansas. You could use a big play, maybe a pick 6, something like that. And Kobe Bryant
He's good.
that guy for Kansas, but I'm going to look at the other corner, which is Mello Dotson. So Mello Dotson also has a handful of interceptions in his career and has a couple pick sixes in his career. And Mello overall has had a good year. I think he's got a 75 grade on Pro Football Focus, but the last 2 games has been a bit of a struggle for Mello Dotson. And so, maybe there is a little bit of, hey, let's not throw to Kobe Bryant. Let's target Mello Dotson, who I think was targeted 10 times last week. I'm looking for a bounce back performance from him. And if he can come up with a big play, pick 6, then it becomes a little bit more interesting. So that would be one guy that I think could, as you're on the road, you're trying to get a road victory here. If you can spring a big play like that, that would certainly go a long way. The other one is J.B. Brown. So right now at the linebacker position, KU's a little beat up. Cornell Wheeler, who's been really good for them and started the year with the green dot, calling out the plays in the middle as the linebacker. He's injured right now, and he's questionable for this game. I guess if you were gun to my head right now, I'd probably almost assume that he's not going to play. Taiwan Berryhill, their backup, has struggled the past couple of years. And so J.B. Brown has even more on him to do well. And when you look at Scattaboo, he obviously is a physical runner. J.B. Brown is a very physical linebacker. So I think there's going to be some fun collisions between those two guys. But I think that's going to be one to watch. Although I guess it'll be interesting too if KU uses any of their linebackers. Is that J.B. Brown? Is that somebody else as a spy? Because they've really struggled stopping quarterback scrambling and quarterback runs.
Sam Levitt is a deceptively good runner. We came into this year as Sun Devil fans knowing that he's athletic and he's someone that could extend plays with his legs. He has turned into a borderline dual threat for ASU. So that will definitely be something that Kansas will have to game plan for. For defense for ASU, like I said, I kind of have 3 guys. The reason why is I'm talking about edge rushers, Prince Dorba and Clayton Smith together. Clayton Smith has been present for all the games this year. He is the team leader in sacks. He is a ridiculously talented player who has really dialed up his game this year. Prince Dorba was tied for your team lead in sacks a year ago. He made his first appearance against Texas Tech, kind of a quiet game, didn't really hear from him. He had the bye week to get healthy and integrated. I'm curious who ends up being the top edge rusher on this team, but I'm going to be counting on them to help set the edge and find a way to contain Jalen Daniels and, that running back who's pretty good, Devin Neal, who I'm definitely worried about a lot. And you're going to need the edge rushers to play well, and you're going to need safety Shamari Simmons to play well as well. He plays in the nickel. He plays deep, but wherever he is, he's really, really fast. He's able to close in on the ball carrier and make plays on the football. So it's going to be a lot on Shamari Simmons to make sure that nobody is getting too far outside on the perimeter and try and keep everything in front of them.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome matchup if he's going to be matched up on Luke Grimm when he's kind of in the slot. But for the offensive players for me to watch, so I feel like you said when you were talking about the offense, quarterback is kind of a given. That's the thing. Like Jalen Daniels needs to throw at least 200 yards for the first time this season if they're going to pull this upset here. Devin Neal in the running game and Daniel Highshaw, like that's kind of a given on what typically you're going to get there. I'm glad you mentioned the Arizona State pass rushers on the edge. I want to bring up the KU offensive tackles. Bryce Cabledew and Logan Brown both rank as top 5 offensive tackles, according to Pro Football Focus in the Big 12 right now. They have grades of 82.7 and 84.9. Cabledew is coming off a game in which he had KU's best PFF grade, over a 90 grade last week. There has been some key plays, though, whether it's been late in the game or on a critical 3rd down in the second half, where they've had a bad holding call or they've given up a big sack. And so it's kind of been a microcosm of the team where overall the team's played pretty well, but then in those key moments they haven't performed. Can you do that in this one? Because I think if Kansas is going to win this game, it's probably going to be a close game on the road. You can't have those mistakes late in the game, but overall those players have been pretty good. And then the other one I'm looking at here is LJ Arnold. Arnold had, I guess, technically 2 drops. One of them probably should have been a catch, but it was overturned after. It was weird. The official close to the ball called it a catch. Then the official on the opposite side of the field came in, said it was incomplete. They reviewed it. They said the call stands. The review the announcers were kind of leaning toward it being a catch, but they were like, I don't know if there's enough evidence. So I ended up not counting. So anyway, long story short, that would have been his second drop of the day. Overall, he's a good receiver, but they haven't really been able to get him going so far this season. If Kansas wants to get the passing game going, it can't just be Luke Grimm, which has been kind of the primary target. It has to be LJ Arnold as well.
There you go. Those are the players to watch for Arizona State and Kansas on each side of the football. Coming up next on this edition, this crossover edition of Locked On Sun Devils and Locked On Jayhawks, we're going to be taking a look at what this game means, the importance, and a little bit more. Coming up next, this is the Locked On Sun Devils and the Locked On Jayhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network's Your Team Every Day. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check the latest stats, you can view a live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can also take a look at college football if you're interested in betting on the ASU-Kansas game or any other game that may pique your interest. You will get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Go to FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook, to get started. Wherever you get your shows, like, subscribe, turn on notifications. We appreciate each and every single one of you for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day. Shout out to the everydayers who are here every day for Locked On Sun Devils and Locked On Jayhawks. Next on the show, what's on the line for this game? What is the game's importance for ASU and for Kansas? Derek, I'm going to hand it off to you to start us off.
Yeah, so I mean, for Kansas, this is, I mean, I kind of said last week was back against the wall, must win. So what does that mean when you lose the game and then the next week? This is almost like you've kind of hit the bottom. Where is this season going to go from here? Is this season going to spiral out of control? Because at this point, like, you're not going to reach your goals. You're not going to play for the Big 12 championship, those sort of things. But are you going to let this spiral out of control and have a 2-10, 3-9 season? Or are you going to at least gain some ground back, build with some positive momentum for the end of the season? Who knows? Maybe find a way to crawl back to 6-6 and make a bowl game, even as unlikely as it seems right now. That's the importance of this game for KU, just finding your mojo back, and you're going into a bye week on top of it. So if you at least get one back, get a tough one on the road against what I think is a pretty good Arizona State team, then you're going to at least have some confidence coming back to you, and at least feel like you're heading in the right direction for maybe the first time this year since really that first week in the FCS win over Lindenwood.
Yeah, for ASU, this has been a year that we've blown away expectations. They were picked dead last in the media poll, right, wrong, or indifferent, whether you were someone that agreed with it or not, if you were an ASU fan that was upset about it, or if you were a U of A fan that probably voted on that poll. They have outperformed expectations. 3-0 start to the year in out of conference play, but then you go to the Big 12 for your first ever game. You go to Lubbock, which is not an easy place to play. You take on Texas Tech, and I've called it like it is. I felt like that was a very humbling loss for ASU. They were riding high, and your first trip in the Big 12 and to a hostile environment in Texas, which is something that ASU has never really had to worry about before, was very different for them. And the tortillas are flying, and the referee flags are flying for both teams. There were 17 penalties. Somehow Texas Tech had more than ASU, but it certainly did not feel like it. So ASU needs to get back on track, and they need to find a way to get their first Big 12 win. This is a really big deal for ASU. You're trying to make a statement in your first year of the Big 12 that you are not one of the worst teams in the conference. And that's where a lot of people very fairly ranked you going into this year. You were not a great football team. Each of the last 2 years, you have only won 3 games. There's no reason for anyone to give you respect as one of the best teams. You've come out and you have shocked people. But the next thing that you need to do is show that you can compete in the conference. Are you winning the championship this year? Absolutely not. Hopefully, you can be a 6-6 bowl team. You need to start getting these wins. And fresh off a bye week, with a lot of confidence in this team, and hopefully they're able to get some of their mojo back that they had from the first 3 games. This should be a game that ASU should be completely dialed in on, all in, and hopefully find a way to pull it out and get back in the win column, get to 4-1, and have that elusive first Big 12 win for the Sun Devils.
Yeah, I think there's a lot at stake, and Arizona State is kind of in a place where Kansas was in 2022, where obviously not as bad for nearly as many years, but with where it's been for the past 2 years for Arizona State, trying to just get back to bowl eligibility, like every win really counts in that way. And yeah, for Kansas, it's just, trying to survive at this point in time. So that's kind of the beauty, too, of the Big 12 when you look at it in all these games. Like even with a team who like Kansas who's struggling, even like a team with Arizona State who, yes, coming off the loss, but has been impressive early this season. Really every game right now, except for ones that are, I don't know, maybe featuring like Kansas State or maybe featuring if Cam Rising is playing for Utah, you feel like you have a shot in, which is
right.
It speaks to the chaos of the league and speaks to how balanced it is and maybe that there's not like an elite team in there, but it also makes it a lot of fun week in and week out.
I love the term chaos. ASU comes from a Pac-12 conference, which every year we would come in, we're like, Oregon's the best, USC's the best, Utah's the best. And by the end of the year, every team is beat up. There's very little odds of sending a team to the playoff back when it was 4 teams because these teams would just beat up on each other. And Oregon could go into Corvallis to play Oregon State and they could be 9-0 and then boom, the Beavers upset them. And then Washington could go down to Tempe and play Arizona State, and boom, they lose, even though they were 8-0 coming into that game. ASU thought it was going to be a little different going to the Big 12. And I love it. Like you said, I love the chaos that's going into this conference. Going into the year, I thought there was like 5 elite teams in the conference, and then there was everybody else beneath them. I said it was Kansas, Kansas State, Utah, Arizona, as disgusting as I feel about saying that, and Oklahoma State. Turns out every single one of those teams is beatable, and it's been a lot of fun. For the importance of this game, I can tell you that it's pretty much what we've already hammered on here is ASU is chasing that first Big 12 win. 3-0 out of conference play is awesome. If you went 3-9, like if you just lost out the last 9 games of the year, you'd feel like this was a completely wasted season. Now, only winning 1 Big 12 game doesn't exactly make it a great season, but you would still like to be able to get that win, get that monkey off your back, if you will, and just get back in the win column. I think that's probably the biggest importance of this game for Arizona State.
Yeah, for Kansas, I think obviously, like I've kind of said, you're in desperation mode. Beyond that, it is very important, I think, for Jalen Daniels, I think for Jeff Grimes, the offensive coordinator, to have good showings in this game to prove that you can be the guy at your respected position the rest of the way. I mean, Kansas is coming into a bye week after this week. There's been a lot of heat from the fan base on the offense coordinator and quarterback position on if there should be a switch at either one. And if there's another bad performance in this one, that's only going to heat up when you would have extra preparation during the bye for your next game. So the importance of this beyond just, getting off the mat a little bit and rebuilding that momentum and rebuilding everything you've done these past couple of years is also for those individuals to kind of take the pressure off.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and head into the final segment of this show as we talk about how each team is going to win this game. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast and the Locked On Jayhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. One last time, wherever you get those shows, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get that update whenever these 2 shows post new content. How do you win this game? I think for ASU, it comes down to 3 different aspects. The first is to make sure that on offense, you are playing to your strengths. That means you need to be heavy on Cam Scadaboo. Don't overthink it. If you need the yards, give it to one of the best kept secrets in the Big 12. Let him churn it out. His longest carry this year is 39 yards, and yet he's still averaging 5 yards a carry. He's just a chunk play machine. You get those 5-yard carries, you get those 8-yard carries, those 12-yard carries. It beats up the defense, and that's what you need from Scadaboo, is to help make it as simple an offense as you can for Sam Leavitt, who is only playing his 5th game in Tempe as a redshirt freshman. You're hoping that the bye week was able to help him kind of mellow out and maybe open up the offense a little more. But this is not a secondary that I'm trying to test with Kobe Bryant and Melo Dotson, especially. Kobe is someone I am absolutely terrified of, by the way. Definitely went into the offseason, and I was like, looking ahead, I'm like, I don't want to play him. He's someone who scares me. And with a redshirt freshman quarterback, I don't know how much I want you testing that secondary. Sure, every once in a while, but if they didn't push the ball down the field, I would be totally fine with that. Defensively, you need to find a way to contain Jalen Daniels as a runner. He's been turnover prone this year. Hopefully you can capitalize on that. ASU opportunistic, but they're not a turnover heavy team. I need to make sure that you are keeping one of the best athletes in the Big 12 in front of you, and you do not let him beat you as a runner, because if he does, then this is going to be a really long night for ASU. Last key to victory here, you just need to get back to disciplined football. This is a team that in week 1 against Wyoming, they were penalized 3 times. 2 of them were delay games. They were able to really, really just have that zen for themselves. Allow their opponent to get in their head and commit those penalties that end up leading to extra opportunities, converting long downs and stuff like that. ASU has been on the other side of that. Their last 2 games against Texas Tech and against Texas State is they're starting to get a little agitated. You need to be able to get more cool, calm, collective, because if you start making the mental mistakes, then a team like Kansas that is still a really explosive offense, if everything is clicking for them, they can take advantage and you can get down on the scoreboard very, very quickly. And I still don't think ASU is a team that's ready to play from behind if you get down 10 plus points.
Well, the good news there is Kansas has blown leads in 3 of their losses if it does end up happening. So maybe that would be the one. But for me, the biggest keys to this one, I mean, you have to be able to slow down the running game. Scadaboo is just an unbelievable running back. Obviously, I mentioned KU struggling against quarterbacks who can even show any modicum of scrambling. So you have to be able to figure that out. The good news for KU, when you look at some of the Pro Football Focus grades, Arizona State's interior of the offensive line hasn't been as great as the exterior, and KU's defensive tackles have been much better than their defensive ends. So maybe that's a good matchup for KU, but you still have to work on the perimeter. You still have to make those plays. The bad news is that KU's beat up at linebacker without Cornell Wheeler. So where do those two kind of come together? And KU, it's not that you're going to completely shut down Cam Scadaboo or the run. You just can't let it be a takeover game, right? Hold them to under 200 yards rushing as a team. Hold them up to under 180 yards rushing as a team. Then when I look at it from the offensive side of the football for KU, what I find very difficult here is Arizona State's leading the Big 12 in yards allowed per carry at 2.6 yards allowed per carry. They're 12th in the country in EPA per run defense right now. In the last 2 weeks, it was up closer to 3.6 per carry, so that number was rising a little bit. But even then, like, that's a number you would take. And for Kansas right now, because of the way that Jalen Daniels has struggled and they're struggling to throw the football, you're ending up with a lot of 7-8-man boxes where they're not just 7 or 8-man boxes. They're keen on the running game to where, you know, plays that we've seen in the past couple of years that were 10, 15, 20-yard runs are 5 or 6 yard runs. And then the plays that used to be 5 or 6 or 7 yard runs are now 2 or 3 yard runs, and everything's losing it. So the end of the day, this does once again fall on the passing game. Jalen Daniels has to have a good game. Jalen Daniels has to help open up the running game and open up the running lanes and open up the box for Devin Neal, Daniel Highshot to get things going. Because if they're not going to pass the football well, and this on Jeff Grimes too, calling the right plays, they have to be able to throw over the middle of the field. That's something they haven't really shown with the Jeff Grimes offense. It's been all perimeter. It's been all very hard throws. It's been vertical throws on the outside that are low percentage completion rate. If Jalen Daniels has a good game, and I'm not just saying it's a fine statistic game, like it has to be a generally good game, I think they can win this game. But right now we haven't really seen much of that to expect that necessarily to be the case. Now, maybe him going closer to home, being on the West Coast, I don't know if he'll have extra family in attendance to this game. Being from LA and stuff, it's definitely possible. Maybe that helps him. Maybe the fact that Kansas has a bunch of kids from Desert Edge High School in Arizona that are coming back home. I don't know. Maybe that helps them give a little extra boost in this game. But that's the other piece of this too. They have to find some motivation, because it's very easy when you're sitting at 1-4 to kind of just go through the motions. And if you're not fully focused, you're going to lose in a close game against a good Arizona State team. So those would be my keys. And yeah, of course, the quarterback has to play well, but I think it's extra pertinent for KU because we haven't really seen that so far this season.
Side note, those Desert Edge kids, Arizona State fans were really upset that they were not able to pull them. One of the things that Kenny Dillingham has really preached on is the movement of Activate the Valley. And that's trying to get all the in-state kids to stay home. And I know that the program was really, really persistent in trying to flip the Desert Edge kids to come back and stay home. But unfortunately, it fell on deaf ears. So that's, really, really interesting. And it'll also be interesting to see if their families end up coming out as well and showing out for the game. ASU, it's a decent home crowd. Opposing teams travel very well. So I am expecting to see a lot of blue in the stadium. I am curious, before we wrap this up, is Kansas winning this football game?
I can't pick it. We just haven't seen it. I am going to go with Arizona State in this one. I'll take them 34-23.
Oh, wow. High scoring. I like ASU in this game. I think that this is a game that I don't want ASU to go into and they're like, oh, Kansas is 1-4 and they're not a good football team and this, that, and the other. You need to go in with the same assumption that we had over the summer. And like I said, I had this game in Penn. There's no way you're winning this football game. This looks more winnable, but that does not mean that ASU is guaranteed the win. I have a lower score here. I did have 24-17. I'm going to knock it down to 21-17. And I think ASU is 4.5-point favorites, so they would barely cover. But it's a game that you really hope ASU is going to be able to come off of the bye week and execute at a high enough level. For Kansas, like you said, you're hoping that this is the game that maybe turns everything around. We'll see. I think that both of these teams have a lot to play for, though. But, Derek, I really appreciate you hopping on, doing this crossover edition of Locked On Sun Devils and Locked On Jayhawks today.
Absolutely. And real quick, if you could, restaurant recommendation for any KU fans coming out.
If you like Mexican food, then I would recommend a place called Ajo Al's. It's absolutely to die for. The pollo con queso is my go-to. Obviously, they have tons of chips and salsa to go around. They've got really good margaritas if you're interested in that. So that would be my recommendation if you're a big Mexican food person. And Arizona has really good Mexican food. It's not like some other like chain restaurant that you would find on the East Coast or anything like that. It's really good. So if you like Mexican food, if you want to test your tolerance on hot stuff, give some of their spicy salsa a try. But yeah, Ajo Al's.
Okay, love that. Appreciate that, and good luck this weekend.
Good luck to you as well. To all of you tuning in, I appreciate each and every single one of you for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. A special shout out to our everydayers who are here every day. We will catch you guys next time, and until then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils and Locked On Jayhawks.